Caddis Maximus here again, this time reviewing the Harbor Freight Quantum QFL-UV ultraviolet, they call it blacklight flashlight, and it indeed is. It's a UVA flashlight. There is 3 spectrums of ultraviolet light, UVA, B, and C. And the B and C are especially the C are the ones that are really harmful. UVC is what hospitals are using for sanitization or small cell phone sanitizers. They emit a very light blue light, actually kind of like this image of a scorpion right here. That is the UV light you really need to be careful of. But you need to be careful with any spectrums, including the UVA. And to point out, the ozone is what blocks out that UVC, and it is a severe form of radiation. It can actually really hurt you. It's quite surprising. Human eyes can barely see black lights. Even though this flashlight doesn't seem particularly bright, it's actually as easily as bright as any other normal white LED flashlight. It's just that your eyes aren't very good at picking up this spectrum. But due to the nature of the way the UVA works, it gives you kind of the interesting phosphorescent glows on things otherwise known as day glow, such as these shoes here. They look like normal shoes, and if we use a black light, we can see that the phosphorescent yellow on it just really reflects a ton of light and really makes it glow. It's pretty surprising, and of course they're very popular at all sorts of parties, concerts, that kind of thing. So the little Harbor Freight unit seems pretty decent. It's actually pretty bright. It has 9 little UV LED elements in it. Billet aluminum construction, a rubberized button, and on this one the button actually doesn't stick out past the end cap of the flashlight, so it's a little harder to accidentally press it to turn it on and off. It does run on 3 AAA batteries in a little cartridge, and I'll give Harbor Freight credit that they actually are including their Thunderbolt Magnums with these lights, which are a decent, or actually Harbor Freight's best alkaline battery. And it's kind of a nice change, you know, when flashlights and all sorts of products would come with batteries, they would come with some really bad batteries. Oftentimes carbon batteries, which are horrendous. So it's nice to see that they include that. And it has a decent system here. We have a little cap that's pressed in and a spring-loaded detent in there, and then a large spring that we can't see down in there. We have a flashlight right here. And then there's a large spring on the other side. So it has pretty good contacts. I do approve of that. It's not relying on just sitting on the PCB. We will compare its black light to this Nebo, which is a multicolor flashlight. And I haven't reviewed this. This is an interesting little light. Let's go ahead and finish taking this down just so people can see what's inside. We do have the cover, the battery cartridge. And, you know, it's you know, just a simple battery cartridge here. Nothing too special going on. You know, it seems like the average, as you would expect, build quality. One thing I will mention is they actually do use coil springs. Some really, really cheap units will just have like a bent piece of metal, which inevitably gets flattened out and loses contact. So at least they're actually using coil springs for the batteries. It does have a pretty lightweight construction. There isn't a ton of machining. What I mean by machining is, say, this Nebo, where we just have all these lines, all these different cutouts, all these different shapes. A CNC machine has to do that work, and it costs money to make those machines run. So this has a bit more simplistic design, but it's not too bad. We have some gripping surfaces, some knurling that really isn't very aggressive. It would be nice if the knurling was a little bit better. And a laser etched logo. And then the mid body is just a tube. And there indeed is O-rings on both sides, so they didn't forget. It's actually really often that they forget O-rings on these flashlights. I found a lot of them, including my little Nebo there, where they forgot the O-ring. So there's the inside. There's actually a really stout spring in there. I'm pretty surprised. And then the actual illumination element, if we can get this unscrewed. And alas, this actually front ring, this is all one piece on the front unit, which ultimately makes it a little bit more drop resistant. And then the little plastic bit, we can see the pieces of plastic that are caught in the threads. This was actually just pressed in there and is being held by the threads themselves. So that's about as far as you can take it apart. But for what you're getting here, this thing I think Harbor Freight has for about $10. Overall, it's not so bad. Let's go ahead and do a little comparison here of it next to the Nebo. Let me pause this video for a second. They talk about some things such as identifying leaks in heating or in air conditioning systems. Yes, there is the oil also has a phosphorescent compound. So if you have an air conditioning system that's leaking, then you can use a black light, and then that oil will glow real brightly. It'll be real obvious. Reading fluorescent inks, antique detection, which I guess only is applicable to certain situations. Hidden pet stains, which is kind of interesting. Of course, identifying currency. And then I really like this, revealing lice and other pests. Kind of gross, and I think you probably would notice if you had lice issues well before you were buying this flashlight to try to find them. And revealing scorpions. An insect like that, I think you'd know if you were dealing with a scorpion because they are very distinctive looking. And I don't believe that this flashlight will actually offer a whole lot of extra assistance in you identifying whether or not you're looking at a scorpion. Okay, I'm going to do a quick side-by-side test and just see. Let me zoom out a little bit here, and we're just going to compare it against the Nebo, which only has 5 UV LEDs, and it has 5 green and some other modes. It's a very weird flashlight where it does flashlight and then green and UV, and then it has a laser pointer and then flashing green. I don't know why they made it. There we go, so that's not too bad. This would be in UV against these phosphorescent shoes. And you can see it works pretty well. Now if we turn on the Harbor Freight, and let's try to do this side by side. Whoop, I was on green. What was I doing there? The green on the green phosphorescence is actually hard to see on the way the camera deals with it. The Harbor Freight's definitely brighter, but this only has 5 elements, where versus this has 9. This should be nearly twice as bright, and I guess it is. So they're using about average grade, and that was kind of the purpose of this little demonstration, was just to see if it was on par with other types of flashlights that are like this. Well, and identifying currency, what they're talking about is many currencies, like this American $20 note, they have these strips in them, and it's surprising how bright this is on the camera, but before your eyes, it's not as bright because your eyes don't pick it up as well as this camera is picking up. But that strip will glow really brightly on both sides. They also do this micro printing, which is actually pretty hard to see just in normal light. But when you use a black light, it looks like it's black and really easy to see all those little tiny number 20 symbols or printed numbers. I'm going to do one more test, and that's going to be against a actual fluorescent black light bulb. This isn't the most powerful. It is a 13-watt unit, and the bulb will be about 3 feet away. And so we'll compare against a real fluorescent black light and see how well it phosphoresces. Okay, I actually have that black light running and warmed up, and it's really not very bright at all. It's kind of interesting how it makes a normal light bulb kind of glow blue. But we can see with the flashlight, it's much more intense than a standard black light, just because the black light's throwing out the illumination in a very broad area. It's like a floodlight, where this is much more focused. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and end the review here. To tell you the truth, unless you actually have a need for one of these lights, they're really not too spectacular to own. You can't really go hiking with them. Because your eyes have such a hard time picking up on them, it's really easy to, you won't permanently blind yourself, but you will, and can cause damage to your eyes staring at this. If you like to use those phosphorescent drawing pens and that kind of thing, that's where this kind of flashlight would come into play. But it's not something I would recommend just picking up to add to a tool collection, just because it may never get used unless you have a real need for a UV flashlight, like detecting refrigerant leaks and those kind of things. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody watching and tuning in to my reviews, and if you haven't subscribed to Catus Maximus, please do support the Catus Maximus channel. Until next time, Catus Maximus out.